Hi, all. Welcome to week 12. This week we'll be discussing religion. Again, I really do suggest kind of at the end of this slide, I'll go over some of the things that will be required of the research paper. If you have any specific questions, you definitely want to email me within the next week or so that you can kind of get moving on your ethnographies. All right, so religion, in terms of definitions, um, these are important moving forward in terms of our discussion that we'll be having. Discussions kind of with your classmates, but also as it pertains to the lecture. Religion is a set of beliefs based on a unique vision of how the world ought to be, often revealed through our insights into a supernatural power, which forms a community subculture through shared experiences and belief. A lot of times religion is deeply tied to the idea of ideal types. So I don't want to go too far into ideal types. We create them all the time in our current society. We also create them in terms of religious aspects, but also how people behave is also kind of related to that ideal type of what that moral code encompasses. Ethics and religion. Some people tie their ethics to religion. It's not required. Morality is also a lot of times tied into religious belief structures, but it is not required. Sorry, it's my young cat trying to include himself in the video. Again, ethics can come from other places. Remember, there's a lot of Native American groups that maybe didn't even really practice true religion, and they definitely had an ethical and moral code. Another idea around religion is realizing that every single culture, it is a universal, that all culture groups have origin myths and or creation stories. I don't really like the term origin myth, but you could see it in readings. Origin myth, to me, connotates some almost like not real or fakeness to it. And I personally believe that people have a right to their story. And if people believe in that story, then it's real to them. So then it should be real to me in terms of my cultural relativity and respecting that aspect. So I tend to use the term creation story. Again, creation story doesn't connotate really negativity. And again, all groups have these. I've probably mentioned a few in the past. One is the Adam and Eve creation story. Very similarly, the Babylonian Empire had a similar creation story. The people in the Arctic believe that there's a group there that believes that two hairy humans fell from the heavens and populated the planet. Korea, the Dangoon creation story is that Dangoon used to live with the gods and came down to Earth with some followers and challenged a bear and a tiger to only eat garlic and mugwort and stay in a cave for 100 days. The tiger fails, the bear succeeds, and ultimately she gets her wish to become human. She's lonely, so Dangoon marries her. So the bear is a very important figure in Korean kind of symbology. Sacred versus profane is an item that Emil Durkheim gives us. It's also very, very important. Really, we need to distinguish the idea of sacred being holy. So when you go to church, that is a holy event or a sacred event, whether it be sacrament or that whole process is sacred. And really, we get into rituals with this, right? Like, so what I just described were sacred rituals. Brushing your teeth is a ritual, but it's a profane ritual. So it's outside of holiness or not holy. Really, that's the difference between sacred and profane, is holy versus not holy. In Anthropologist Religion, the reason why I put this on here is there's a common misconception. I encountered this today too in one of my classes, that anthropologists, archaeologists don't have religion. This is just absolutely not true. There are a lot of anthropologists that I know that are deeply rooted in their faith. And some of the reasons this is because a lot of times science can't answer some big questions for us, which is where do we come from and what happens to us when we die. So again, science can give us their answer, but they don't actually know for sure, just like nobody knows for sure in terms of what kind of heaven looks like until you go there, if you go there. So again, I think that realizing that a lot of anthropologists have religion and kind of do a syncretism of ideologies, which is it may be religious ideology and then kind of anthropology, and they syncretize those and put those together in some unique ways in order to form kind of their identity. All right, religion, magic, and science. Sir Edward Tyler believed that religion, magic, and science were all different ways of explaining the physical world, events, and phenomenon. Tyler and others were kind of cultural evolutionists, so they also believed that religion has evolved, and their steps of religious evolution was animism, or the belief that everything had a spirit, polytheism, gods, multiple gods, into monotheism, one god, and then their ultimate version would be science, and where man kind of turns himself into God and destroyer of the earth and those kinds of things. So again, those are kind of fascinating concepts around cultural evolutionists. Again, I'm much more of a relativist, so I don't think that it just cut and dry that simple and doesn't really necessarily equate out. But for Tyler's definition, I think that it holds true in terms of explaining the physical world, events, and phenomenon. That's really what we're trying to do with science, and that's really what religion tries to do as well. Magic definition: people's attempt to compel supernatural forces and beings to act in certain ways. So if we take this definition, living people's attempt to compel supernatural forces to act a certain way. So I think one key piece here is that again, some of these terms should not be taken to offense, but if we are to use this definition and apply it across the board, there's some different forms of magic, right? One is imitative magic, law of similarity. Something done to X will happen to Y. Voodoo dolls are an example of that. Contagious magic is law of contagion. Teeth, waist, or hair can be used as a symbol of that person. So prayer comes up as a form of magic, right? So if I'm a young boy and I'm praying that my parents somehow get more money so that we have a bigger Christmas, again, I may not know truly what prayer does and how it works, but it is my attempt to use a certain level of magic, which is I'm trying to compel a supernatural force, aka a god, and to behave in a certain way so that then I benefit from a larger Christmas. I'm not trying to downgrade prayer. What I just gave you was something that I actually did when I was a child. So in terms of prayer as a form of magic, anytime you're trying to compel a supernatural force or even have a conversation with a supernatural force, there's a piece of kind of this idea of magic involved, at least from an anthropological perspective. Remember, take some of these things with a grain of salt. I'm not here to crush anybody's worldview at all. I'm deeply respectful of people's religious beliefs and find them amazing, fascinating, and super functional and super important. Magic in sports, we see this through superstitious ritual. Some guys tap their helmet. Some guys tap the plate a few times. Usually it's around batting, sometimes around pitching. That's obviously baseball, but a lot of superstition. I mean, I went to school with a guy, he's a really nice guy, who he was superstitious to the point where he would wear the same socks every game, even though they were super nasty, and he would spray them. This was his kind of magic in sports or supernatural power. I don't know why he kept doing it, because we lost every single game that season, at least in the league. So anyway, this is his attempt to control a supernatural force using a ritual. So how beliefs are expressed, Beliefs and creation stories are passed down generation to generation using stories. Again, sometimes myth is the word that is used, and doctrine. Doctrine has more to do with kind of law, written laws. Um, and the definition of a myth is stories about supernatural forces or beings. Again, I think the issue is we call them myth because a lot of times we can't prove them, right? If somebody tells you a story, like especially like a creation story, this is a creation story around a crane and a coyote, and kind of they're tricking each other into a creation story. Um, Myth is a tough one to kind of have a conversation about. But I would say that again, it has everything to do with kind of proving, right? Um, there's no way for us to prove in the Ayatol culture that three humans jumped out of a large basaltic rock and one jumped back in and two created the tribe. We just can't prove it. So a lot of people end up calling that a myth. Direct statements about religious beliefs. A lot of times this is kind of people how they discuss their religious beliefs in terms of a faith or a hope or a understanding or a creation story. When I'm discussing kind of direct statements about belief structures, a lot of times people make these generalized statements like I believe in X or this is the way that it is. They talk in absolutes, so it kind of gets again. The reason why this happens is because people tend to tie themselves pretty deeply to their religious convictions in terms of identity. Um, Remember going back to the first day of class or the first week of class, I discussed the axial age and canonization. Canonization, remember, is writing down of those beliefs. So we might have been orally passing down creation stories and or religious ideology, but it's not till the axial age until we start canonizing it, which is when we start to actually write it down and spread it around the world in terms of reading. And then it moves on a mass scale. And remember, we start to see kind of a movement out of this mythic stage, this stage of animals creating the earth and creating us. It's quite fascinating, especially because if you go far enough back, physical anthropology would talk about evolution, and some of these creation stories kind of include some interesting combinations of species and interactions with species, and anyway, some kind of intriguing stuff. But it is the axial age that starts to kind of remove a lot of this mythical stage um, and move us into kind of well, maybe asceticism, which is like, what is my place in the universe, and then moving more towards like Buddhism or Jainism to a certain degree, which is I want to become one with the universe, but it's like one with one. The individual becomes the important aspect here, and really like where we're at in our society today is just kind of a 2,500 year experiment into this kind of oneness or one's place in the world. Malinowski believed that myth was a character ethos of society and helped form core beliefs and morals for that group. Um, this is true of certain groups. I mean, the tough part again is this was probably true of Malinowski's people, the Trojan Islanders, when he was observing them. But we have groups of Native Americans, especially down in like the San Diego area, northern Baja, where they really didn't even talk about religion. Like Great Spirit was maybe there, but hardly even discussed. Religious ideology was not even part of their daily life. So there's some, I guess there's some caveats to kind of this ethos or core beliefs and morals, and we'll talk about some of those other things. As it pertains to hunter gatherers, right? So again, our perception, a lot of people tell us this, like we would all just go kind of crazy and do these bad things if we didn't have our religious morals or we weren't raised a certain way. Um, Again, millions and billions of people have been on this planet before us um, and didn't require kind of this religious morality. They had norms, taboos, and they had their own moral code, and it was based on